Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome everybody. It's good to see you. If I could have your attention, we're going to get started. I think I know most of you. I'm Joel Rosenthal, President of Carnegie Council. And I want to begin by welcoming our colleagues from the Carnegie UK Trust. This event is part of a study tour organized by the Trust, inquiring into the future of public libraries. And as a subset of that question, the issue of privacy in the digital age. We began the discussion yesterday at the offices of the Carnegie Corporation and at the New York Public Library. And we're delighted for the opportunity to expand it in a broader discussion with all of you today. One of the advantages of being a Carnegie organization is that we benefit from the ideas, inspirations, and good works of our sister institutions. The Carnegie UK Trust is an extraordinary organization based in Dunfermline, Scotland, the birthplace of Andrew Carnegie. The Trust's programs influence policy and deliver innovative ideas to improve well-being across the United Kingdom and Ireland. I particularly admire the Trust's creative effort in community engagement at the local and municipal levels. Their motto captures perfectly the Carnegie ethos: changing minds, changing lives. Their work is fact-based, inclusive, open, and pragmatic. And this, I think, is the Carnegie signature. This meeting gives me the opportunity to publicly thank the leadership of the Trust. And although they're not present today, outgoing Chairman Angus Hogg and Executive Director Martin Evans have demonstrated admirable stewardship of the Carnegie legacy. Trustee Albert Tucker, who is here and who will speak in a moment, is representative of this impressive leadership team. I would also like to recognize Anna Grant, the head liaison of this study tour, who's done an excellent job in organizing the program. Thank you, Anna. Anna, where are you? She's in the back doing all the work. That's how it always is. 4 Carnegie Council trustees are here today, and I'd like to recognize them as well. Rich Edlin, Jonathan Gage, David Hunt, Bob Perlman. Andrew Carnegie believed deeply in the leadership capacity of trustees who would be true to the founding principles of the organization and yet always ready to adapt to new challenges. I think he'd be pleased to see all of you here today working in this vein more than 100 years after our founding. So I've been asked to say a few words of introduction to set the frame for our discussion. The real experts will follow me, but I want to offer just 3 observations very briefly to get us started. First, a word about the moment that we're in now. We all know that Apple can track our movements through our mobile devices. This includes how many steps you take per day, where you go, how many flights of stairs you climb. Facebook can record our interests in news, hobbies, travel, consumer purchases. Google can track our internet searches on every subject, professional and personal. Amazon can sell you a voice recognition personal assistant called Echo that listens to every conversation and responds to your commands and requests. Amazon can also sell you the Nest home monitoring device, tracking the temperature in your home, your electricity usage, and the security video of who comes to your door. Music vendors like Pandora catalog the music you listen to. National governments compile databases on taxes, communications, and security threats. Local governments and their agencies, such as libraries, know which books you read. Most organizations can tell whether or not you open the emails and electronic newsletters they send you. They can see which stories you click on and how long you spend reading each one. All of this information is collected and stored digitally. In his book, Free Speech, 10 Principles for a Connected World, Timothy Garton-Ash sums it up perfectly in one phrase. He says, "We are all tagged pigeons now." Several other writers invoke another image to make the same point. They mention Jeremy Bentham's Panopticon. The Panopticon was Bentham's design for a prison, where all the inmates could be watched by a single watchman without knowing if they were being watched or not. The idea of an all-seeing, omnipresent eye is chilling at a basic level. And this leads to my second observation. That is, how should we think about control of the information that is known about us? Again, to quote Timothy Garton-Ash, who spoke here not so long ago, and some of you may have been present for that, he says, "A basic principle must be that my data remains mine, not yours to data mine. Citizens should have what the Germans call informational self-determination." An advocacy group called Privacy International puts it this way: privacy is the right to control who knows what about you and under what conditions. But as we've seen the arguments over the so-called right to be forgotten, that is the right to be off the grid, so to speak, there are deep-seated cultural differences over what this right entails. Debates are ongoing as to what exactly constitutes the conditions under which a right to know outweighs the right to privacy. Finally, it's important to remember that we're not without moral or legal compass when it comes to the idea of privacy as a right and as a condition of well-being. For all of the novelty of our current situation, we should probably be skeptical of the idea that it is unprecedented. For example, Timothy Garton-Ash reminds us that in 1890, a law review article written by Samuel Warren and Louis Brandeis was titled "The Right to Privacy." It laid out principles that remain relevant to this day, including the idea that there should be protection against intrusion into private affairs and public disclosure of embarrassing facts. So, how we develop and adapt ethical principles around privacy in the internet age is an open question. Our study group that is with us today, with its focus on libraries, may have a special contribution to make, and we believe that they do. Libraries have always been important norm setters for community engagement. We believe they will continue to play this norm-setting role well into the future. Privacy is a fundamental human value. The stakes are high and the conversation important. So this is a big agenda, I know, but if not us, then who? Fortunately, we have great speakers here today to lead the way, and I'm going to turn it over to them. I want to thank you all for coming, and now turn it over to my colleague, Albert Tucker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joel. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for welcoming us here in New York in this wonderful space. And thanks to our colleagues, Joel and colleagues at the Carnegie Council, for hosting us. We've been taking in this wonderful city of ours, I have to say. We've claimed ownership as well, having been looking and walking around the city and visiting the museums and discussing this issue. The Carnegie UK Trust, which is one of the family of Carnegie organizations, we very much work towards an evidence-based approach to change. So we try and understand impartially and without prejudice what the situation is, try and empower citizens, try and get people to really think about the issues, but also to try and understand feelings. Weirdly, in the policy world, people don't talk about feelings too much. How are people feeling about things, and will that help us change? We also put a great deal of store in learning from others, the people who think about these things, the people who work with them, the people who are activists in these areas we're interested in changing and empowering citizens in. So this is a part of that process. So there's 12 of us from across the pond here and from across the UK, representing different aspects of the UK, different aspects of the world, different skills in this area, but also not just in this area. We have a much broader frame. In fact, probably the person who least knows about how libraries function is myself. But actually, the task at hand is critical going forward, I think. So I'll just quickly to say who we are, and the fact that you would all come and share a room with a gang of British people coming to talk about secrecy and privacy and data protection is a testament to your interest in the issue as well. But I just want so you know who the people are in the room. We have, I think these are some of the leading thought leaders in this area, and we're hoping that from understanding this more, we can have a much broader reach with this group of people who have the reach, influence, ability and energy to actually make a difference. And together, hopefully, and from what we learn from people like yourselves, we can take forward. So we have people who have responsibility for the libraries networks, people who advise on government and institutions on policy. We have key members of the Carnegie team who are going to take this forward. We've got people who are also working on consumers and how they engage with libraries and the digital world. We have people who are going to influence what kind of IT and digital technology, people who run business, community-based libraries independently and trying to make that really respond to consumers. Those who are challenged about how libraries really listen to the people who use them and what future role they can play. So we cover a wide range. But just quickly to say who we are here, and just so I don't miss anybody out, we've got Martin Wade, who is with us here. If you could just stand up and give a little wave so people know who you are. Martin is there. I won't tell you too much, just catch up with people when you want to. We've got Tricia Ward, who is here with us. We've got Neil over there. Catherine Stiller, who is an MEP, a member of the European Parliament, and really has been a supporter of the Trust and in our work with libraries. Ryan Mead, here. Ciara, who you're going to hear from later. Ord, Brian Ashley, where's Brian? There you go. And Will Perrin. And we really have been trying to look and understand the issues as a team here. And we have also got the two people who keep us in order and make sure we actually meet the brief and not enjoy New York too much. We've got Douglas White from the Trust and Anna, who's been really organizing everything for us. So thank you very much for having us here. So the format, Joel informs me, is slightly different to the usual format here. So maybe I should explain that a little. We're going to have, Ciara is going to tell us a little bit about the experience in the UK, just to give us a sense of points of difference later when we reflect. Then we will have, I think we're very privileged to have Bruce Schneier here, who is going to talk to us from his experience of this. And I wait to hear what that's going to be about and which directions he's going to take us in. Deborah, who, despite having injured her arm, is here with us and will be responding to what we hear. And then we will have questions and answers, which we can, we really would like for you to look at this issue around the ethics of it, the differences between our different countries, maybe if we understand that clearly, what some of the challenges are, some pointers for the future, and food for thought. I'm a keen one for food for thought. Are there things we should be thinking about going forward from your experiences and your areas of expertise? That would be most helpful. And we should be looking to finish by 3. There's still food and drink, so do feel perfectly free and able to go and top up. So you're not chained to your chairs or restricted, and I won't be treating you very harshly because you get up and go and have a drink. I would see it as part of the process of stimulation of the mind. Yeah. So. As I've said, for us, this is really important, the exchange of information, the sharing and meeting you all, particularly at a friend's house. That's a great one. So without any further ado, I'll ask Ciara to come and tell us a little bit from her perspective on the issue.
Thank you, Albert, and hello, everybody. What I'm hoping to do in just the next 5 to 10 minutes is give you a very quick overview of the position for libraries in the UK. Given the time constraints, I'm not aiming to be completely comprehensive, so I trust that you'll trust me to give you the highlights, and my colleagues from the UK, any errors or omissions are my own. So what I'm hoping to do is to give you a flavour of the kind of multi-dimensional position in the UK in terms of libraries and this issue, because it's not simple or straightforward. So I'm going to talk through the different stakeholders in this space. And first of all, I want to talk and start with the perspective of libraries' most important asset, our staff. They are delivering services directly to the public across the UK in over 4,000 public libraries. And it is our staff, really, that are helping us, helping people within their communities navigate these issues around data and privacy on a very regular basis, day in, day out. Through our network of free public internet provision, through Wi-Fi and fixed PCs in libraries, the public library has become the place of first resort and last resort for citizens who need access to online services. Where once people would have gone to the job centre on the high street to look for work, they now come to the library to complete their required 35 hours a week online searching that they need to do. If they cannot demonstrate that they are doing 35 hours a week online searching, they risk losing their benefits. Where do they go? The library. Where once people would have gone to the housing office in their local community to look for council or social housing, they now come to the library to browse available properties, of which there are often not very many, and bid for the best ones available. So the cutbacks that we've seen across all public services in the UK over the past 5 years mean that increasingly libraries are the only civic space within communities for those seeking information and support. And against that backdrop, our staff are performing an incredibly important but often invisible job in helping those people to access government services. And I think in doing this, they're carefully navigating issues around privacy and data. And they're often very vulnerable people they're serving who lack literacy skills, sometimes with mental health issues, who perhaps unsurprisingly often need fairly significant support in terms of setting up email addresses, creating passwords, and generally engaging in the online civic space, where sometimes usability and accessibility of online services is not as good as it should be. I'm fairly confident from my own experience within my own team in Devon that our staff working across libraries in the UK are very conscious of these privacy issues, though I say that without any solid evidence. We don't specifically train staff to address these issues in any detail, and as far as I'm aware, there are few, if any, privacy policies in existence in UK public libraries. Turning now to what's happening at a library leadership level in the UK, the Society of Chief Librarians, otherwise known as SCL, catchy title, we're the body that represents heads of library services in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and we've been working at a national level, particularly within England, since 2013 to develop a series of universal offers around the 5 key areas of public library provision: reading, learning, information, digital and health, with a further offer around culture being launched shortly. Now, we've used the framework of the universal offers to enable us to develop national partnerships that can be levered for benefit at a local level, to advocate the reach and impact of public libraries, to lever more investment into service development, to drive innovation and aspiration, and to train our staff in the skills of a 21st century library service. Specifically in relation to the issue that we're talking about today, our universal information offer has been particularly successful in developing a clear sense of what the key issues are for supporting people to gain access to online services. So in 2014, over 80% of England's public library workforce, thousands of people, participated in online learning to develop their digital skills so they're better able to support library customers. And in 2016, just last year, SCL secured a place on the Government Digital Services Framework for Assisted Digital and Digital Inclusion Services. Very snappy title, I think you'll agree. And that means that as individual government departments move their services online, they should use the framework to tender for support so that barriers around disability or literacy should not prevent people being able to access those services. At SCL, we work very hard to sign up the 151 different library services across England to this framework. That had never been done before. But the carrot for all library services was for the first time, library services might get paid for what they've previously been doing for free. Just as an example of that, the library service on the Isle of Wight, very small library service, has recently undertaken a pilot as part of the framework to test out new approaches to the census, as the next census in 2021 will be done entirely online, which I believe is the same here. Could this be a real opportunity for libraries to be centre stage for the work around the census in a few years' time? Our universal learning offer has focused on developing the skills to help our staff shape a much more engaging, lively, dynamic digital offering. We've developed a resource called Code Green that encourages innovation around hackathons, Raspberry Pis, makerspaces, all sorts of engagement. And within the universal digital offer, SCL has pioneered a digital leadership programme supporting existing and up-and-coming leaders with the skills and confidence to lead in the digital space. Issues such as how library leaders should be shaping the marketplace in terms of procurement have been amongst the topics discussed by those digital leaders. And we've established a national innovation network so that best practice and ideas around digital services can be shared easily within the network. We've shaped an initiative called Access to Research with academic publishers so that people using our libraries have access to high quality, reams and reams of high quality academic research, which they previously could only access through a university, and they can do it for free in their local library. So there is much that SCL has progressed at a national level that's relevant to our discussions about data privacy. Much that could provide some of the building blocks that could help us take back the conversations from our study trip and make things happen. But I have to say that the issue of data privacy is not one that ranks highly on the list of library leaders today. Too often the brains of library leaders, people like myself leading a library service, Neil leading a library service, are preoccupied by austerity and the need to cut significant sums of money from the library budget. These discussions can become all-consuming and get in the way of broader and important discussions about the role and impact of libraries within communities. Other issues, just briefly to give you a flavour on that I think are pertinent in this space, relate to the changing governance structures within UK public libraries. So we're seeing increasingly that libraries are being handed over to volunteers and run by volunteers. What guidance and support are those volunteers being given around data privacy? I'm not sure that we know. And in organisations like my own, which are now operating as spin-outs from the local authority in pursuit of a much broader base of income, operating models from the commercial sector, will there be more of an expectation from our boards, from our funders, to look at how we commercialise our own data? More positively, how can we use our data to shape new services using the techniques of the private sector to provide better, more targeted services for our existing and potential users, an issue that Carnegie picked up recently in its Shining a Light report on UK public libraries. Finally, there are reasons to be cheerful. We have some emerging good practice. We have Aude Charillon, who's here with us on this trip, who is almost single-handedly showing us some new possibilities. She's hosted crypto parties in Newcastle libraries and is gradually growing a public debate in her city about the potential of libraries around privacy. We're seeing a growing interest in open and big data, with services like my own being much more interested in sharing our data sets with others and overlaying them with other data sets, such as those around deprivation. We're doing it with an open mind. We don't know where it's going to take us, seeing what might come. But we're hoping, certainly in Devon, that the act of sharing our data itself will begin to open up new dialogues about the role that libraries play and the social impact that they create in communities. And at a national level, we have CILIP, our professional body, actively shaping this space and collaborating with Carnegie and others to push the agenda forward. So in summary, our experience in the UK tells us that our communities, particularly those who are most marginalised and potentially disenfranchised, are in need of support from us on this issue. We know too that our workforce are already responding positively to those needs and helping their users navigate sensitive issues around data privacy. We know that they need more practical support in terms of both training and privacy policies to provide a framework for that public engagement. As library leaders, we're confident that we have many of the building blocks in place through the universal offers and our national partnerships to take forward this agenda. And we know that we can tap into the expertise and support of national organisations like our professional body CILIP, the Carnegie Trust, and our other non-library colleagues on this trip who've much knowledge to share. I think it's fair to say that this week in New York, we're learning huge amounts. I've learnt an awful lot, which will help us connect up the conversation back in the UK. And we look forward to learning more in this afternoon's seminar that will enable us as library leaders to take forward libraries' really important role as educators, conveners, data processors and purchasers in the area of data privacy. I think the issue strikes at the heart of our professional DNA as librarians. It's what motivates most of us to keep working in libraries, that sense that we're here to ensure the access to information for everybody. And I know, speaking for my colleagues, I think from the UK, we really look forward to exciting new possibilities in our library policy and practice inspired by this trip. Thank you.
The report that Ciara mentioned, Shining the Light, is a report that the Trust has done looking at the use of libraries. And Anna, our colleague, Anna Grant over there, has lots of copies if anybody is interested to get some copies from her. But we found in that report that actually libraries are still very, very valued in our context, that young people are using libraries more, which I personally didn't think was the case. Also that people are using libraries and wanting to use libraries for more things. But we also realized that people didn't know enough. People didn't understand enough how best to use it. So some of the things people were asking for, some of my colleagues here are already introducing in their environment, but people don't know enough about what is available. We also are hearing more about the convening power of libraries in our areas from that report. But also yesterday, we found out at the New York Public Library that the libraries are being asked by the city to actually educate the citizens on data protection and privacy. And for us, that was really interesting. That's a really interesting move about the role of libraries as educators, not just as a knowledge base, as educators and as thought leaders in this whole issue of data protection and privacy. So from that point, I come to Bruce. Bruce, who my notes tell me is a security guru. Internationally renowned security guru, so I can't wait. Bruce.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks to the UK colleagues for inviting. I'm using the microphone that's here, so I don't need that one. You let me know if it's a good. Happy? All right. Hi. I grew up in New York, so it's always nice to be back. I want to give people who are visiting the UK a little advice. Those cookies in the center, the round ones, those are called black and whites. When I was a kid, they were much bigger. The way you eat them is you take the cookie, break it in half, separating the black from the white, eat the chocolate, and then leave the other half for your sister. Always worked for me. So Joel talked a bit about the things around us and the data they collect. And I think it's worth talking about what's happening and why. The fundamental truth is that everything we do that involves a computer creates a transaction record, right? Some data about the transaction. And whether that's browsing the internet, using or even carrying a cell phone, making a purchase either online or in person with a credit card, walking by any Internet of Things sensors, saying something around an Alexa that's turned on, walking past any of the millions of security cameras in this city, in London, everywhere. Right? All of those things produce a record of what happened. Right? Data is a byproduct of any socialization we do in the information society. Phone calls, emails, text messages, Instagram posts, Facebook chatter. This is all data. This data is increasingly stored and increasingly searchable. And this is just Moore's law in operation. Data storage gets cheaper, data processing gets cheaper, and things that we used to throw away, we now save. I mean, think of email. Back in the early days of email, I would carefully curate my mailboxes. I had hundreds of mailboxes. I figured out what to save, what to throw away. I looked back recently. In 2006, I stopped doing that. Before 2006, hundreds of email boxes. After 2006, I had 7. Because for me, for email in 2006, search became easier than sort. Right? That threshold has largely been crossed with pretty much everything. It is much easier to save everything than to figure out what to save. And the result is that we're leaving this digital exhaust as we go through our lives. This is not a question of malice on anybody's part. This is simply how computers work. And this change has brought with it a lot of other changes. Right? Our nature of using data has changed. It used to be we would save data for historical reasons, to remember what we said and what we did, to verify our actions as some third party, to let future generations know of what we thought. Increasingly, data now drives future decision making. Right? That's the promise of big data. That's what machine learning does, and I'll talk about that later. This data is surveillance data. The phrase you might remember from the early months of the Snowden documents was the term metadata. Metadata is data about data. It is data the system needs to operate. Right? So for a cell phone call, the data is the conversation I'm having. The metadata is my number, the other person's number, the date, the time, our locations, the call duration. For email, the data is the message I'm typing. The metadata is the from, the to, the routing, the timestamp. We can argue about the subject line. Metadata is surveillance data. In those early months of the Snowden documents, President Obama said, don't worry, it's only metadata. But let me give you a little thought experiment. Imagine I hired a detective to put you under surveillance. I'm sorry, to eavesdrop on you. That detective would put a bug in your home, in your office, in your car, and collect the data, the conversations. And that's what, NSA at that point said, we're not collecting that. Now, if that same detective put you under surveillance, he'd produce a different report. Where you went, what you did, who you spoke to, what you purchased, what you looked at. That's surveillance. That's metadata. Metadata is actually much more important than conversational data. It tracks relationships, it tracks associations, it shows what we're interested in, who's important to us. It fundamentally reveals who we are. Nobody ever lies to their search engine. And it's also easier to store, to search, and to analyze. And right now, we are in the golden age of surveillance. We are under more surveillance than anybody else in human history, by a lot. And it has some interesting characteristics. It's incidental. It's a side effect of all the things we want to do. It's covert. You don't see the approximately 100 internet trackers that are tracking what you're doing as you browse. Right? If they were standing behind you, you'd say, go away. Right? I'm doing something private. But they're in your computer. They're hidden. They're covert. You didn't see most of the cameras when you walked here. They're there. It's hard to opt out of. It's actually very hard not to be under this surveillance. I can't not use a credit card. I can choose not to use Gmail, to say, I don't want Google having my email, so I'm not going to use Gmail, and I don't. But last time I checked, Google has about 2/3 of my email because you all do. And it's ubiquitous. It's happening to all of us everywhere because everything is computerized. And ubiquitous surveillance is fundamentally different. And we know what surveillance is like. We see it on television. It's follow that car. But ubiquitous surveillance is follow every car. And when you can follow every car, you can do different things. You can, for example, do surveillance backwards in time. If you have the data, you could follow that car last week, last month, last year, as big as your database is. You can do things like hop searches and about searches. And they were in the news recently. These first showed up in 2014. But there was a new change in NSA procedures about these. Hop searches are where I have you under surveillance. So I'm going to also listen to everyone you talk to, everyone they talk to, everyone they talk to. I remember the phrase 3 hops. It was really big in the US in those early Snowden months. But that's 3 hops. The goal is to find conspiracies. What you actually learn is everyone orders pizza sooner or later. Or about searches. Right? Don't search on the name. Don't put the name under surveillance. Look for people using this word, using this phrase, talking about this topic. And you can't do that unless you have everybody under surveillance. Right? Find me someone that meets certain surveillance characteristics. I want to know everybody who's been at this location this time, this location at that time, that location at that time. I have 3 location timestamps. I can find that. Now, there's a couple of really clever things that came out of the Stone Dogs the NSA is doing. They have a program, I'm not making this up, it's so cool, that looks for cell phones moving towards each other, turning themselves off, and then turn themselves on again about an hour later, moving away from each other. They're looking for secret meetings. They look for phones that are used for a while, then turned off, and then find other phones that are turned on for the first time geographically nearby right after. And if you watch The Wire, you know what they're looking for. They're looking for burner phones. They have a program where they know the phone numbers of US agents around the world and look for other phones that tend to be near them more often than chance. Right? Looking for tails. And you can go on in the things you can figure out here. Now this is mostly done by computers. Right? These are inferences. Now, I was listening to Albert talk about coming to New York, looking around with this delegation of people. I mean, it sounds like he's casing the joint. And that's what's going to show up in the data. And it's computers doing this. Right? People see the results the computers spit out. Now, this data is largely being collected by corporations. All the data we're talking about it's not government data, it's corporate data. Surveillance is the business model of the internet. We build systems that spy on people in exchange for services. I mean, you all know that the reason Facebook is free is because, well, you're not the customer, you're the product. You're the product Facebook sells to their customers. Now, this business model emerged, it didn't have to emerge. It really emerged for efficiency reasons. In the early days of search, of email, of social networking, there wasn't any obvious way to charge. You couldn't really make micropayments. And people expected the internet to be free. So advertising sort of showed up as the model, which made the internet work. On the side, in the US certainly, you had a huge data broker industry that came out of mailing lists and mail order. Companies that made their living slicing and dicing the population into small targeted segments that you can send direct mail to. And they had large databases of personal information. Right? And those two combined into sites that make their business spying on us. And that's Google, and that's Facebook, and that's Microsoft, and that's Uber. Right? And they are the world's most valuable companies. Right? Companies that have our data are more valuable than companies that make the stuff we buy. Right? But always remember, if it's not obvious that you're the customer, you are the product. And the drivers here, the reason we have this is free and convenient. That's what we want. And to be sure, this data is collected for the purpose of psychological manipulation. We call it advertising. And it's now very exact and very personalized. We're reading about how it affected both Brexit and our election. Right? It's propaganda. It's personalized ads, personalized offers, personalized manipulation in ways that would be impossible otherwise. One, because we wouldn't have the data, and two, we couldn't do the targeting. On the internet, you can target individually in a way you can't with television or billboards or radio. So the personal data is valuable enough to make Google, Amazon, Facebook, Uber. Tesla is more valuable than GM because they have data that GM doesn't. It doesn't matter. They sell 1,000th of the cars. And corporations know an amazing amount about us. This is a perfect surveillance device. This knows where I am at all times. It knows where I live. It knows where I work. It knows when I go to bed, when I wake up. Right? We all have one, so it knows who I sleep with. And it has to, otherwise it won't work. I mean, I used to say that Google knows more about me than my wife does. That's certainly true, but it doesn't go far enough. I think Google knows more about me than I do, because it remembers better. I mean, who knows that you're here? Well, your cell phone company certainly does. If you use Google Maps to get here, Google does. Any other bunch of smartphone apps collect your location data. You took an Uber to get here. You made a credit card purchase nearby. Used an ATM machine. Security cameras again. License plate scanning companies. And they're making inferences. And we know a lot about this, right? Facebook knows you're gay even if you don't tell Facebook. I mean, these companies, there's a great article in the New York Times 6 years ago or so about Target Corporation, it's a big retailer here, that knew when someone was pregnant before her father did. Because it's able to make these inferences. Right? It's not always right, but for advertising, you don't have to be right all the time. You have to be right most of the time. And government surveillance has largely piggybacked on all these capabilities. Right? It is not that the NSA woke up in the morning and decided to spy on everybody. They woke up in the morning and said, wow, corporate America is spying on everybody. Let's just get ourselves a copy. And that's what they do. And this allows governments, both US, UK, and everywhere else, to get away with a level of surveillance we would never allow otherwise. If the government said you must carry a tracking device at all times, you would rebel. Yet we put this in our pocket every morning without thinking. Or if we have to alert the police when we make a new friend. You can imagine a regulation like that. You laugh, but you all alert Facebook. Well, you have to give the police a copy of your correspondence. Right? You never would, but you give it to Google. And just as corporate surveillance is based on free and convenient, government surveillance is largely based on fear. Right? Fear of criminals and terrorists in our countries, fear of dissidents and new ideas in other countries. And ubiquitous surveillance turns out to be a very, very useful form of social control. Now, there are differences here. And we're seeing it in the politics right now of surveillance for intelligence purposes and surveillance for law enforcement purposes. Intelligence purposes are more about metadata and flows and trends and relationships. Law enforcement tends to be more about, I need to know what's in this iPhone right now. Right? I have a person here. He's a suspect. I want to convict him. I need his iPhone. Right? Which you don't really see in the intelligence community. That's more about, give me a whole bunch of data and I can, figure some stuff out. But that's more in the noise. I mean, really, we have a public-private surveillance partnership. Right? Fundamentally, both governments and corporations want this ubiquitous surveillance for their own reasons. A lot of data flows back and forth. And there's some breaks in this. I mean, you're seeing corporations fight government a little bit around the edges, but very publicly, because it's a good PR move. But largely the interests are aligned. And it's power against us. And Google wants you very much to have privacy from everyone except them. Just like the FBI will say that. We want you to have privacy, just not from us. But it doesn't actually work that way. So let's talk about why this matters. I mean, I think in an audience like this, it's all obvious. But I want to enumerate some of the reasons. There are very profound implications for political liberty and justice, for people being accused by data, and data being used as evidence. Again, it's no big deal if it's for advertising. I get shown an ad for a Chevy I don't want to buy. Put in a different context, and someone drops a drone on my house. There's an enormous amount of self-censorship in communities that are affected by this kind of surveillance. And this inhibits dissent, inhibits social change. It's ripe for abuse. There are matters of commercial fairness and equality that we are seeing surveillance-based discrimination, surveillance-based manipulation. We're seeing our data being exposed when the third parties that have it have privacy breaches. This matters for reasons of business competitiveness, that companies operating in countries with this kind of surveillance are being hurt in the market. We're seeing US versus EU. Right? As EU has much more stringent privacy rules than the US does, really affecting US companies. Right? This affects us for security. And the infrastructure of surveillance hurts our security. There's an article today that the US Senate is for the first time allowing Signal to be used by Senate staffers. This is Signal. This is the program they called evil because people are using it to protect their privacy. They finally realized that, wait, we need to protect our privacy. And because there are security implications for having all this surveillance data available to anybody. Anybody who can buy it, anybody who can steal it. And this, of course, affects privacy. And fundamentally, deep down, it affects how we present ourselves to the world. It affects our autonomy as human beings, and by extension, ourselves, our liberty, our society. So how do we fix this? Now, I actually wrote a book on this. If I was clever, I would have brought a copy, but I wasn't. So hopefully someone in this building has one, or you'll just have to imagine I'm holding a book. It is called Data and Goliath. I spent a lot of time on how to fix this. The first one is to recognize that we need security and privacy. You often hear this discussed as a trade-off, security versus privacy, as if those under constant surveillance might feel more secure because of it. But I think we need both. Privacy is a part of security. Security is a part of privacy. And more importantly, we need to prioritize security over surveillance, just like the US Senate just did. You know, we live in an infrastructure which is highly computerized. Either we can build it for surveillance, which allows, right, the FBI and the Russians to get at our data. We can build it for security and allow neither. Another principle is transparency. There's a lot of secrecy in this world. And one of the lessons I think we've learned, post-Snowden, is that secret laws have failed. That the secrecy means there's no robust debate in our society about this, either on the government side or on the corporate side. We need more corporate transparency as well. I assume people, if you're interested, just look at the really impressive series of investigative reports New York Times published on Uber and the things they're doing with our data. It's pretty scary. I mean, it's things that are online with some of those NSA programs I talked about. They were able, using the Uber data they had, was to identify regulators, because they would tend to hail Ubers near government buildings, and they would show them a different, more legal version of Uber that us normal customers wouldn't see. They actually had a name for the program that was surprisingly benign. So transparency, but that's not enough. You need oversight and accountability. You need some methods to deal with these issues. There's an important principle, which I call one world, one network, one answer. That we just don't know how to build a world where some people can spy and some people can't. Right? The FBI very much wants into your iPhone. Not all the time, just in case they think you're doing something. But they'll say, we don't want a back door. We just want an ability to get in that only we can use and someone else can't. But I don't know how to do that. I can't build an access mechanism into this device that only operates when there's a legal warrant sitting next to it. Right? I can't make a technical capability function differently in the presence of a legal document. Either I make this secure or I make this not secure. Then I got to build some kind of social system to try to hope that only the FBI uses it and the Russians or the criminals don't. But I don't know how to do that. So it's either security for everyone or security for no one. I assume people have been paying attention to the big ransomware attacks of about a week now. The latest rumor is that North Korea is behind it. I don't know if you've heard that. I mean, that's not my guess. My guess is it was and still remains cyber criminals. but could be North Korea. I mean, and it's true. I mean, we actually don't know, and this is an amazing thing, whether this attack that's affecting hundreds of thousands of computers around the world is the result of a nation state with a $20 billion military budget or a couple of guys in the basement somewhere. I truly don't know. And it could equally be either. Right? That's the world of this democratization of tactics. Right? But the vulnerability that's causing that is a vulnerability that the NSA knew about at least 5 years ago, kept secret instead of telling Microsoft so they can fix it, right? So was using it to spy on people, but they don't get to be the only ones. Turns out someone stole that vulnerability from them in, we think, 2015. I'm not exactly sure. Published it in March. The NSA actually realized it was stolen between when it was stolen and March. Told Microsoft about it, I think, in January, and Microsoft fixed it in February. But a lot of you didn't install your patches, and that's bad. But this is complicated, right? The NSA can't keep that vulnerability just to themselves. They can keep it secret so anybody who knows about it can use it, or they make it public so that everybody can protect themselves. And one more quick story. Anyone heard the term Stingray? Stingray is an IMSI catcher. Basically, it's a fake cell phone tower. And the FBI uses these to figure out who's in an area. So they'll take one of these Stingrays, they'll set it up, and because cell phones are like dumb and promiscuous, they will connect to anybody that claims they're a cell phone tower. That's the way the system was built, very insecure. So they'll put up a Stingray, all your phones will connect to it, now they know everybody who's here. This was really secret technology when it was developed. And the FBI would, I'm not making this up, drop court cases rather than let evidence about Stingrays appear in a public proceedings. When there was a FOIA request in Florida to get some Stingray data, federal marshals swooped in and took the data before it could be given away. It turns out, though, this actually isn't very secret. About 2 years ago, a web magazine, I think it was Vice, I think it was Vice, went around DC looking for Stingrays and found dozens of them operated by who knows who around government buildings, embassies. Now, you can now, if you want, go on Alibaba.com and buy yourself a Stingray, an embassy catcher, for about $1,000. Right? Either everyone gets to use them or nobody gets to use them. So the solutions here are very complicated. I mean, they're political, legal, technical. We're living in a world where, because we always knew that technology can subvert law, but we also learned that law can subvert technology. And we need both working together. And we don't have time for concrete proposals. It's been a bunch in my book. But really, social change needs to happen first. Right? None of this will change until, one, we get over fear, and two, we value privacy. This is hard. I mean, there's lots of studies that show that we value privacy greatly, but it comes down to the point of purchase. I mean, we gladly give up our privacy for 1/10,000th of a free trip to Hawaii or the Canary Islands for you other guys. Right? I mean, this has to be a political issue. It was not in the last US election. I doubt it is in the current British election. I haven't been paying that much attention. But there's a real fundamental quandary here. And that is, how do we design systems that benefit society as a whole while at the same time protecting people individually? And I actually think this is the fundamental issue of the information age. Our data together has enormous value to us collectively. Our data apart has enormous value to us individually. It is data in the group interest versus data in the individual interests. It is the social benefit of big data versus the individual risks of personal data. And this problem shows up again and again. Like movement data. I landed at LaGuardia this morning. Traffic was miserable. My taxi driver used a program called Waze. I don't know if you know Waze. Waze is a navigation program that gives you real-time information on traffic data. How do they get that data? Because everybody who uses Waze is under surveillance. They know how fast you're going. Traffic was miserable. That program got me here. Got me here earlier. It was very valuable at the expense of being under surveillance. Okay. Advertising. I actually like it when I go on Amazon and I get suggestions of books I might want to read based on books I've read. That is valuable to me. And of course, it's valuable to Amazon at the expense of a company that has the list of books that I've purchased. I mean, this is the bargain that the NSA and GCHQ and FBI, all these organizations say to us. Right? We want your surveillance data. We'll protect you from terrorism, from crime. And lastly, medical data. I think there is an enormous value in all of us, in the country, in the world, taking our medical data and putting it in one big database and letting researchers add it. I think there are amazing discoveries to be learned from that kind of data set. On the other hand, yikes. That's really personal. And how do we make that work? Right? Data in the group interest versus data in the individual interest. So I started by saying that data is a byproduct of the information age. Go one step further. I think data is the pollution problem of the information age. I find it interesting saying that here at a center built by Carnegie. Right? You think about it, all processes produce it. It stays around, it's festering. How we deal with it, how we reuse it, recycle it, who has access to it, how we dispose of it, what laws regulate it, that's central to how the information age functions. And I truly believe that just as we here today look back at those early decades of the industrial age and marvel on how the titans of that age could ignore pollution in their rush to build the industrial age, that our grandchildren will look back at us here today in the early decades of the information age. And they're going to judge us on how we dealt with data and the problems resulting from that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bruce. My takeaway from that is just that your last phrase. Data is the pollution of the digital age. I'll have to think about that one a little to get my head around that. So if I can just ask, I think one of the things for us for this study trip is also how do we, in our work with libraries and the role of libraries, think about the issues you've raised for us. Thank you very much. Can I ask Deborah Caldwell-Stone, who's Deputy Director of the Office for Intellectual Freedom in the American Library Association, to give us something of a response to that.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to be with you here today. I want to look at this from the perspective of American libraries, which have a deep tradition of defending individual privacy when they provide services to library users. And what I'd like to say is that if surveillance is the business model of the internet, then public libraries are well placed to function as an intermediary and a defense against surveillance, at least at the individual level. Their role is as an educator, as an empowerment to an institution for empowerment for the individual who wants to make choices about what happens to their data and what kind of surveillance they're subject to. Now consider, 100% of the public libraries in the United States offer access to the internet and provide their communities with essential links to e-government, employment, educational services, and resources. Adding to this, librarians are technology leaders here in the United States. We're a profession that used digital technology for circulation systems, online catalogs, and information databases long before the rise of the internet, and applied privacy principles in the use of that technology. Some of the most knowledgeable experts on the secure use of digital resources and networked and online technologies are librarians. Consider that protecting patron privacy has long been at the center of the mission of the American Library Association and the library profession. As early as 1939, librarians affirmed a right to privacy for library users, asserting that privacy was a necessary condition for the free and full exercise of the right to read and receive ideas. Librarians understand that a lack of privacy in one's reading and intellectual activities inevitably chills inquiry, damaging both individual rights and the democracy that supports those rights, and so has continued to zealously adhere to the professional commitment to protect user privacy. Librarians have protected these rights in small, quiet ways in their day-to-day work. For example, shredding computer sign-up sheets at the end of the day, enabling anonymous logins to institutional databases, informational databases, or even setting up what they call warrant canaries, setting up signs in the window saying, the FBI hasn't been here today, to let people know that they can come into the library with the knowledge that no one's asking for records. They also have worked to protect privacy in more public ways, by opposing warrantless surveillance under the Patriot Act, or going to court to challenge government demands for library records. And when the pervasive use of digital content, social media, and search engines expanded the collection and use of patrons' personal data, librarians similarly shifted their attention to the privacy challenges posed by commercial online services. Witness ALA's public protest of Adobe Digital Edition's practice of collecting and transmitting large amounts of unencrypted data about the readers who used its ebook platforms. ALA went out, we marshaled support among the members of the association, we filed a protest, we went public, and ALA soon persuaded Adobe to encrypt the data transmissions to protect the privacy of the readers. Consider, too, that libraries are trusted community institutions that offer confidential information services in a non-commercial atmosphere, a real rarity today. The Pew Research Center, who has conducted nearly a decade's worth of surveys of library users, today summarizes the results of its research by simply stating that people like, in fact, people love their libraries and they trust their local library. They see the library as a safe space for unobserved and private information seeking. Now, there's an issue with that belief, but we'll set that aside for now. But according to the most recent Pew surveys, a majority of Americans look to their local library for information about technology, with over half of those surveyed agreeing that libraries contribute a lot to their communities by providing a trusted place for people to learn about new technology. More importantly, a majority of those, 80%, say that libraries should definitely offer programs to teach people, including kids and senior citizens, how to use digital tools like computers and smartphones, how to secure the privacy of their data. And in fact, libraries are already deeply involved in providing their communities with instruction in digital literacy. The most recent Public Libraries and Internet survey conducted by the IMLS, the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences here in the United States, over 80% of libraries report that they offer classes on general internet use, general computer skills, and point-of-use technology training to their patrons. So again, if surveillance is the business model of the internet, public libraries are well placed. They're in position to serve as an intermediary and a defense against surveillance. To achieve this, libraries are doing many things, but the real focus is on education, developing classes and learning opportunities that assist patrons to make good decisions about protecting their privacy. A great example of this here in the United States is the San Jose Public Library's Virtual Privacy Lab. I don't know how many of you have heard of it, but in that case, the San Jose librarians and local privacy experts from Berkeley created an online interactive game for patrons to use to become privacy literate. Users can generate a custom privacy toolkit when they visit the library's website, a toolkit that's geared toward their unique privacy needs, because the library has accepted the fact that everyone's privacy needs are different. Some people want to be more social and open, others want to lock down their data. And this toolkit is customized to the extent that they will offer a toolkit to each pull of privacy needs. And to broaden its outreach, the library has even had the website professionally translated into Vietnamese and Spanish, the two primary immigrant populations in the service catch of that library. Other libraries are installing privacy self-defense tools on their public computers and offering classes to the community on how to use these secure technologies to take more control over their personal information and online identity. Some examples of these types of tools are Privacy Badger, which allows the user to see and block ad and social media trackers to the best extent that they can. HTTPS Everywhere, which encrypts and secures a person's individual web browsing. There's also DuckDuckGo, a no-track search engine, and the Tor browser, which you must know enables secure anonymous web browsing. So it's so libraries and using these tools, libraries are giving control back to the user. They are trying to serve their patrons in the best way they know how and offer them the choice to try to evade surveillance as best they can. It's not perfect, but it does do the job of making those tools available to them and making them, more importantly, making them available on the library's own computers. It does no good to teach somebody how to use the Tor browser and not put the Tor browser on the library's computer. Now, libraries and librarians are developing initiatives to foster greater awareness of privacy concerns, and tactics to defend privacy for librarians themselves. It's an interesting fact that when we went out to look at what libraries were doing around privacy, we found a real gap in knowledge about what privacy concerns were and what tools individual staff line librarians had available to them. In regards to this, the ALA runs an initiative that you may have heard of called Choose Privacy Week. And to be blunt, it is very much modeled on our Banned Books Week, only in regards to privacy. We want to raise awareness of privacy issues. We want to engage the public in a conversation about this. We want to involve the entire library profession in the United States in a dialogue about what we can do to best defend privacy in the library and in the wider world. And we started out Choose Privacy Week as a flat-out campaign against government surveillance and monitoring. It was spurred on by the Patriot Act, of course, and the discovery of other government tracking and surveillance programs. But as we went along with Choose Privacy Week, we found that librarians themselves needed to be equipped with knowledge and tools to help their patrons defend their privacy and to institute better privacy practices in the library themselves. So Choose Privacy Week has now evolved, and now it's not just focused on government surveillance, but it's also involved in equipping librarians, educating librarians with the tools they need to better serve their communities with privacy protections. There are two initiatives here in the US right now that are doing similar work, equipping librarians to better defend patron privacy. One of them is the Library Freedom Project, which is run by librarian Alison Macrina here in the United States. And she does privacy trainings that are very much focused on raising awareness of government surveillance and corporate surveillance, and what tools like, for example, Tor browser that libraries can use to enhance privacy. The trainings are intended for librarians, and then the librarians are expected to take their training and train their individual patrons on these issues. Another initiative, which I don't know if you may have talked to some of these folks here in New York, but it's the Digital Privacy Project at Brooklyn Public Library. And they're doing a great work in training New York librarians about data flows, privacy threats, and how they can be addressed so that those librarians and library workers who meet library users face-to-face on a daily basis are better equipped to serve the information needs of persons asking what they can do to protect their privacy. Now, I have to say that everything I've talked about so far is what I call above-the-line services. These are direct patron services, direct patron engagement. But there are below-the-line services that every library can start tackling in order to preserve patron privacy. In fact, they're a necessary part of preserving patron privacy. And one of them is to engage in a process of auditing the library's own data collection and use, and to develop privacy and procedures that is privacy protective. I see from the tweet stream that you visited the New York Public Library. They're a prime example of an institution that has taken on this process. Bill Marden has done an enormously wonderful job of tracking what data flows are going on in and out of the library and what policies and procedures he needs to put into place to protect the privacy of the individual patron. This includes dealing with third-party vendors who provide services and digital content to the library, and developing things like model contracts that incorporate things like privacy standards and recognize the New York law that protects the privacy of patron data in the contract itself, so that the vendor is bound to protect the data, not sell it to third parties, and not treat it in ways that they would treat the commercial data at all. The other things that libraries can do, and they aren't doing here in the United States, is in fact encrypt their own web presence and their own storage of data. ALA has embarked on its own project in regards to this. We've partnered with an organization called Let's Encrypt, which is a certificate authority that issues security certificates for encryption, which are a necessary part of the process, for free. There's no charge for this. And they actually have automated the process of installing the certificates on the servers that are in use in the institutions that are seeking the encryption services. We are hoping that making certificates free and easy to install, more and more libraries, even the smallest rural libraries, will be able to encrypt their web presences and then again better secure their users' library data. But another part of what libraries do is advocacy. And I've talked a little bit about this. But one of the things, major roles for ALA, one of the major parts of my job, is to advocate for privacy protective law, to try to make those changes in society that are necessary to protect user privacy. An example of this that there's been some success with are student data privacy laws. As you're aware, learning analytics are a big thing today, big data in education. And we have found that entities like Google and other learning analytic companies are collecting the smallest details about K through 12 students and storing it forever, and then making it available for analysis. And there needs to be some protections for this. And so there has been a growing drumbeat from librarians, from educators, for laws to protect this data, this very sensitive data, and even try to forestall some of the collection that's going on. And so we have been in the forefront of going to state legislators and asking for student data protection. California has the model law, which is called Student Online Privacy Protection Act, so PIPA. And we continue to pursue such laws. In Missouri, we persuaded the state legislators to amend what we call the Library Privacy Confidentiality Act. And each of the 48 states in the United States, there's actually a law that defends the privacy of patron privacy. And they've amended their law to impose a duty to protect patron data on the third-party vendors themselves, and so that there is a legal duty not to sell or disclose patron data. We also, as you know, very obviously have advocated for the reform or repeal of laws that allow the warrantless collection of user data. And we advocate against pervasive non-targeted government surveillance, such as Bruce talked about. But the other work that we've been involved with is the promulgation of national standards, which is something that the UK may be interested in. working under the sponsorship of the National Information Standards Organization, NISO. Public school and academic librarians met with digital content publishers, library systems vendors, and academics. In other words, we sat down with the enemy, and we sat down and hashed out what was needed to protect patron privacy while allowing the vendors the data they needed to operate the digital content systems, the integrated library systems that libraries rely on to provide both content and service to their users. These standards, published in 2015 as the NISO Consensus Principles on Users' Digital Privacy in Library, Publisher, and Software Provider Systems. Yes, it was a consensus process. They establish standards for policy and practice that are intended to assure patron privacy while providing, to allow the digital service, the provision of digital content and network services. And this balancing that is talked about often. Between the need for to preserve privacy while allowing enough data to flow to provide the services. So these are just a small example of what we've been pursuing here in the United States in order to protect patron privacy as best we can. We aren't able to solve the larger issues that Bruce talked about. We do participate in the advocacy to try to solve those issues, but where we are located in our communities, on the ground, working one-on-one with individual patrons. We're in the trenches trying to help them, help individual users make the choices that they need to make about preserving their privacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Can I have a big hand, please, for all our speakers? Thank you. Today was not being live streamed, but of course we'll have a record of the event. So, and also do feel free to tweet and all the other things that will be so securely tracked as we go along. And do, if you ask questions and speak, do tell us who you are and where you're from, so we could all know. But the other thing I want to say is, for the purposes of this conversation, privacy and privacy are the same thing. Right. So don't get thrown by different emphasis on that word. We're talking about the same thing, and data as well. I think that was taken as read as well. So if you have any questions, specific questions for any of the speakers, do please identify that, and also let us know if you can share with us as well any thoughts and ideas that come from that. I really like the grappling in the trenches with the legislators and the regulators to try and actually make some progress on that ground as well. Thank you for that. Okay, I think there's a mic behind you.
One question for Bruce, I think, and for whoever was throwing crypto parties over there. My name's Nate Hill. I run an organization called the Metropolitan New York Library Council, and we're just beginning a new program where we're designing a data privacy curriculum that we're going to roll out across the 3 public library systems in New York City. And one of the things that I'm really thinking hard about with this is how to change the culture around privacy and security. It's very hard to talk about it for too long in the way that we've been talking about it without somebody saying something about a tinfoil hat or something like that. And I'm wondering if anybody has any thoughts about how we can make this kind of thing more accessible, something that people readily want to join in on. I'll give another example. The reason that I say the crypto party example is I was working at a public library a while back, and through something like that with like a DEF CON group or something like that. And the first thing that happened is a bunch of people came in with their lockpicks and tried to pick the server box in the library. And so it was not this kind of like welcoming thing that a lot of people wanted to come and join in on. So I'm really interested in the culture around these issues. I think the Data Privacy Project and the Library Freedom Project are great, but I don't know that they have succeeded in making this a really widely inclusive effort. So if you guys have any thoughts on...
I can talk a bit about that. This is actually a hard topic. It is hard to make privacy... It's hard to make privacy into something people care about Because like many fundamental rights, you don't notice it till it's gone. And like many abstract rights, they're easy to bargain away for a small benefit. I mean, if you offered a Big Mac for a DNA sample, you have lines around the block. Because, you know, Big Mac's tasty, right? What are you talking about? So you mean near-term gain versus potential long-term loss. I think we need to really reframe privacy as personal autonomy. And privacy is not about something to hide. Privacy is about controlling how I present myself to the world. You know, when I am under ubiquitous surveillance, I lose control over how I present myself to the world. And I become less than a fully autonomous human being. And I think those kind of conversations make privacy less into tinfoil hat, government's out to get me, more that, you know, this is how I navigate a complex world while retaining myself. But this is hard. I mean, it is hard for all of us. These are not, you're dealing with abstract losses. And the same problem we have with getting people to install patches against, you know, these computer vulnerabilities or to floss. I mean, the immediate cost is tangible. The long-term benefit is abstract. And people are terrible at making those sorts of decisions. We don't buy life insurance.
Thank you. Deborah, do you want to?
Yeah, and I've got my mic on too. I would recommend getting in touch with the folks at San Jose Public Library. I know, yeah, it's great work. You know, and it's like that was their starting point, was to say that this is a matter of autonomy and choice, and everyone has a different place where they're at with privacy and what they're willing to trade for and what they want to keep secret or keep private. And so I really respect the work that they're doing. And we are, in ALA, are trying to push this idea out to the larger profession. But it's a slow-going thing because it's really, part of it's generational. I think we're going to have to see a generation of librarians retire before, to be blunt about it, you know.
So we've already started a process of retiring librarians.
Yeah. No.
Could you hold on a moment?
Sure.
Sorry, no, finish your point, Deborah.
Yeah. Yeah, and at any rate, I think
I've got somebody else on the same point before you.
Yeah. But I think that's what we're really going to have to do, is just do it and it's an incremental process of education, and we just need to have leaders in place that are determined to push this agenda forward. And so I'm there, at least for the time being, at ALA, and I know that the member leaders on the privacy committee at ALA are devoted to working on this issue.
Sorry, that's just me with a really small voice. So yes, we've hosted 2 crypto parties in my local library in Northeast England last year. And yes, when the council person came to do a video to help us promote the events, they did ask, are people going to wear masks? And I said, no, they're not going to be wearing masks. It's just normal people going to learn about something. But for us, it's really part of your basic digital skills. You know how to use a mouse and a keyboard. You know how to use a browser, so you should be able to know how to protect your privacy and know about online security. And that's why actually at our crypto parties, we only attracted the people already aware of those issues. And our next step is going to be targeting the people who really need to know because they are not aware of those issues. So my next steps this year are going to be working with what we call our Silver Surfers group. So this is our older citizens group who are learning digital skills. So I am definitely going to do a privacy sessions for them. We've got colleagues also doing a lot around digital inclusion in less wealthy areas of the city. So again, it's building those privacy tools and privacy skills within our existing digital skills programs.
And also, I think you talked about behavioral change. I think you mentioned it as well. I think there's something about culture change approaches that we should also think about. How do we make this issue popular in terms of language, semantics, and approach? And I think there's some different approaches being highlighted here. Can you?
Hi, I'm Ron Berenbaum. Just a quick comment and then a question. Privacy is a matter of expectation, and I think at least this talk has been kind of an eye-opener for me as to the extent to which my privacy may be getting invaded in ways that I didn't know. And an example of what I mean by expectation is the article that Joel cited, the famous article by Brandeis and Warren, which was the first legal formulation of privacy, which was the right to be let alone. And there's an interesting backstory on that. Warren was a very famous Harvard Law School professor, and he became enraged when pictures of his daughter's wedding at a local country club appeared in the newspaper. And so he got his best pupil, guy from Kentucky named Louis Brandeis, and they defined the right of privacy for the first time legally, and it became a legal expectation because for most of human history, nobody's had privacy. It's a very middle-class notion. The lower classes didn't have privacy. They all lived in one room. And the upper classes didn't have privacy because they all had 8 or 9 servants in every room they went to. So that is, and so the management of expectations is a key role for people, libraries, or any institutions who want to do something about that. And I have to tell you that even at my tender age, expectations seem to have changed just very, very dramatically throughout my life. But my question is this. I did some work on privacy about 20 years ago when it entailed whether or not somebody was reporting to human relations about stuff that maybe shouldn't be going on around the office and that kind of stuff. And what I learned was that there was, and what everybody knows, is that there's a very real difference in the expectation of privacy between Europeans and Americans. And so now we have a lot of information, a lot of stuff coming down the wire about the EU, about Britain's likely exit from the EU, about other countries that may want to get out of the EU. And the EU has, as we all know, some people in Brussels who define what a banana should look like and everything else. And they certainly have a lot of regulations about privacy. So that in the negotiations to leave the EU or remain in the EU or so on, is privacy going to be an issue at all?
Okay. I'll come to you. You want to?
Okay. Yeah, I'm.
Everyone ducks the question.
No, I'm William Perrin from the UK. I'm doing a piece of work for Carnegie UK Trust on Brexit, as it's known, and the digital sphere. One of the things, so the issue of privacy and data rights in Britain is actually at quite an extraordinary juncture. So the country has voted to leave the EU. It's about to elect I can probably say this fairly, a rampantly Brexitist government in the current general election. And yet the government has committed to bring in the new EU privacy and data protection legislation during the process of Brexit. So we'll actually put a bill before Parliament to implement the very latest EU privacy and data protection directives because the corporate interests are so colossal. They've been very clear, it's a very pragmatic decision by the British government that if they are to remain a very successful centre for technology startups and very large technology businesses, we have to have uniformity with the EU companies with whom we trade in the trade of data. And so in that sense, no, it won't come up because they've said they're going to adopt the new EU regime. There's a brand new EU regime, the General Data Protection Regulation, that comes into force in 2018. It's reasonably different to the current regime, but in the eyes of many commentators, it is not up to speed because it can't be. It's been many years in development with the latest developments in machine learning and very, very large-scale processing, where someone characterized it beautifully the other day. We're moving from a position where the basis for a decision on manipulation of a piece of data used to be a human decision. It will soon become a machine-based decision. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it produces some enormous and quite profound consequences for which we don't yet understand, let alone that we are not yet capable of regulating and regulating for.
I think that's the point Bruce is making, I think, about where this could go. But in classic British tradition, just because it's not going to come up doesn't mean it's not significant. Can I?
Hi, I'm Lisa Rosenblum. I'm the Director and Chief Librarian of Brooklyn Public Library. Thanks for the shout out. And thank you for the cookie tip. I moved here almost 2 years ago, and I didn't know that about the black and white. I appreciate that. This is more of a comment, and I'm not sure you can answer it, but just an observation, having been in the public library business for more years than I'd like to talk about, and I'm not going to retire. What I've noticed is that, you know, as Nate said, the privacy thing, sometimes I think I care about it more than other people do. But the second thing is that public libraries are sitting on a lot of really great data. And people want that data. Internally, people want that data because the reality is that public libraries really have to push their relevancy more now than ever in my career. And that, you know, I'm lucky I live in a great city and it has a lot of support. But there are public libraries across the country who don't have the support, are trying to get money to survive, to fix branches, to buy collections. And it's really tempting to, with all the data we have, to use it for marketing purposes, for to be cool, to be like Amazon or to be like other high-tech companies that in Facebook to use that data. So I just want to sort of give everybody a reality check. This is the world we live in, and we're sort of, I think, at a crossroads. I like the privacy stuff we're doing, but the reality is that that to me is a more significant issue that I'm facing in the public library. If you want to comment.
Oh, go ahead. I mean, and I think this is an important consideration because I mean, this isn't why. I mean, it's not that the companies we're talking about are immoral, that the business model that's legal allows surveillance. And if the head of Google stood up and said, we're no longer just going to spy on our users, he'd be fired and replaced with a less moral CEO. Right? Because doing what is legal is what we expect from corporations. So if we're going to change this, it has to come through law, which means you're not going to get corporate surveillance dealt with until you deal with government surveillance. You're not going to get government surveillance dealt with until you deal with fear and this thought that if we spy on everybody, we can find the bad guys. I also want to point out the Brooklyn Public Library is a great library. The main branch is a fantastic building, and I spent way too much of my childhood there. And I do recommend going to Grand Army Plaza and seeing it.
So you see, marketing doesn't have to be based on data.
It is a fantastic, it's a fantastic building.
Deborah.
This is where I said I'm not going to talk about that right now, but we'll get to that later, and we've gotten to it. For me, that's the greatest issue that I am confronting and working with libraries on privacy issues, is that you're concerned about it, but I know libraries that are out there using their data for marketing, and sometimes with third parties outside the library. And we're struggling with this issue. But the Privacy Subcommittee has pretty well concluded that this is not right. And so we're encouraging projects. Becky Hughes at Seattle Public Library is deeply involved in a project to deal with what she calls data de-anonymization, so that the library will be able to strip all as much of the personally identifiable information out of the data, but still leave it useful for marketing. And it's an initiative that she's been leading now for a year and a half. And we're very hopeful about it. And in fact, she has an article in the new Journal of Intellectual Freedom and Privacy that just came out this week describing the project and its utility for libraries. And so we think that this is where we have to go at this point, beyond also talking about sticking to ethics and privacy, the user's privacy rights and their right to control and make choices about their data, even in the library. But it's what we're looking at right now.
Douglas has a question, but I just want to throw a food for thought question, which is there a place, is there a way citizens can take advantage of this data collection? Douglas. Well,
Oh, sorry. You wanna answer that?
just is your
Okay, so
Or
let
is
me answer that. So that's often called surveillance. It's surveillance from underneath. Now, right, so can we use this data to know what our government is doing, to know what power is doing? The short answer is not really, just because the natural power imbalance makes that very difficult. There are examples where transparency surveillance is used to track money laundering or flights, airplane flights of African dictators, or how road repairs are happening. But there tend to be exceptions. That the data is not generally available, so you or I cannot get the same benefits of it that Google can.
so transparency is not there for
The transparency isn't there. This data is proprietary. It is owned. Data about you in the US is owned by the company who collects it.
Douglas. Thank you.
Douglas White from the head of advocacy at the Carnegie UK Trust. I just wanted to ask a question to Deborah, but also to other public library colleagues in the room to get your take on it. And it was particularly on the campaigning aspect of your role and how that plays out as when you're campaigning for greater privacy and against particular pieces of legislation or regulation, and that might be against or counter to what the government of the day might wish, but at the same time public libraries relying upon funding from those same government sources, and how you navigate that tension and any lessons or advice you can give us in that context.
Well, in fact, here in the US, ALA takes a lot of that heat. We are a professional membership association, and we are able to go out and frankly say things that a local library may not be able to say in a particular circumstance. And so using your professional your professional organizations to offer leadership and to do the kind of lobbying that's needed to get these kind of laws on the book is probably a good solution. And as libraries can, they join in this advocacy. And I know a number of library directors who've been very successful on pitching privacy as a bipartisan issue. It isn't left or right. Everyone has something that they want to keep private, and they seem to understand. I go back to the Missouri Library Confidentiality Statute that was recently amended. That was amended with the leadership of a very deeply conservative Tea Party Republican in Missouri, which is not what you would think. But he has a libertarian streak. He is very fiercely defensive of individual privacy, and he was proud to go into the Missouri legislature and lead the effort to amend the Library Confidentiality Statute in Missouri so that it applied to the third-party vendors, that it covered all the digital content and network services that a modern library uses these days. So there are ways of working on this, pitching the message, and finding ways to empower individual library boards, library directors, librarians themselves to speak to this issue without endangering their funding necessarily. But
we think Donald Trump is receptive to a pro-privacy message right now.
yeah, well, we were just glad to find one in Missouri, let me tell you.
All right, thank you. Well, you had I also had a thought, if we could think a little bit of the educational role that libraries can play in this to arm citizens. I know you've given some examples, but if there's any other strong thoughts or examples of practice that maybe we should be thinking about. So I've got Will, then you'll be next, and then I'll come to you.
As well as writing for Carnegie at the moment, I'm a trustee of a thing called the Indigo Trust, and we blazed a trail for many years funding technology and transparency projects in sub-Saharan Africa. And I thought Bruce's analogy with pollution is a very good one, where pollution regulations have tightened up in the developed north. We've ended up exporting a lot of the pollution to the south in quite an unscrupulous way. And I just wonder if anyone had any thoughts on how we could use international fora to improve privacy rights globally, very much as the copyright industry has done to drive their interest through. And yeah, it's a massive lobby, though. It's a massive industry. But it's all very well us standing here and talking about this in an exchange between, allegedly, despite current circumstances, two of the world's most advanced democracies, when in fact the real pain could well be felt in the less developed South.
You know, in many ways, technology is on our side here. Unlike pollution, a car manufacturer will sell different cars in the US and Mexico because the environmental regulations are different. Software is much more efficient if you make just one version and sell it everywhere, by a lot. So you often find that in the US, the software will conform to the most strict state regulation. Around the world, it'll conform to the most strict large market federal regulation. And if the EU pressures Facebook to change their practices, they're likely to change their practices globally because that's easier, right? Unlike the automobile. So there's real value in the more privacy-focused countries pulling it up for the rest of the world. Now, you have a backlash. And if you remember some years ago, the governor of the UAE said to BlackBerry, we can't eavesdrop on BlackBerries, fix that for us. Right? And then BlackBerry and every other company gets to decide, is the market worth it? Right? Right? Google is in China, even though China does much more surveillance. But BlackBerry, I think, decided to, I think it was Saudi. They're going to pull out of Saudi. Okay, you want us to compromise the system, we just won't have it in your country. So I think you're going to see different dynamics because of the inherent write once, used everywhere property of software.
Great, thanks. Can you have your question?
I'm Bill Martin. I'm Director of Privacy at New York Public Library. Nice to.
And I think I saw you last month at that NetGain event, right?
Not sure. No, I don't.
Someone
somebody
from the
like doppelganger.
Yeah, talked about what the New York Public Library is doing.
So one of the challenges I was talking to this group about yesterday is we constantly have vendors that we're dealing with who will make the argument, people understand today that they have to give up a certain amount of privacy in order to use our product. And it boils down to essentially the argument, if you want to benefit from the bounties of the digital universe, you have to abdicate a certain amount of your privacy. So my question to you is, how do you respond to that essential argument that says you have to give up something to get something? And if you do agree with that, what are the bounds for that? So we were talking about GDPR yesterday, which seems to be a good model, certainly more stringent than what we have in the US. Maybe not a good model. I can see your eyes rolling.
No, I'm a fan of GDPR. It's okay.
Okay. But what is the model that we should follow, if there is one? And where do we go from here?
So in a sense, you do have to give up something to get something. But it doesn't have to be privacy. It could be something else. We have decided collectively that we are going to make the internet free in exchange for privacy. We've forced the trade-off on people. They're not making it. You don't really have a choice. And this is true. I mean, if you talk to someone younger than me, being on Facebook isn't really a choice. It's a fundamental essential for being a fully functioning human being in college. You're not on Facebook, you're invited to parties, right? You never get laid. It's just a bad year. So, but it doesn't have to be free.
I think that's a tweet that's
right?
If you're not on Facebook, you don't
so,
get
so
laid.
So we decide that. I disagree that people understand the trade-offs. We know from lots of studies that people really don't, or there's learned helplessness. Right? And you know this. You go to your phone, you install a new app, it comes up to a screen, and it gives you all these things that are taken from you in exchange for using the app. You don't read it, you don't look at it, you click OK, because you know you have no choice. Right? That is not a fair exchange. That is coercion. And we have built that system. We have decided.
But you choose to pick up that app.
You do and you don't. I mean, so sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
Let's not have a debate.
In a lot of cases, you have no choice. You can't not have an email address. You actually can't. You can't not have a credit card. I mean, some of the little apps you have a choice, but in a sense you don't. I mean, these are the tools of being a fully functioning adult in the 21st century. And they are built on surveillance. They don't have to be. We have decided to build a regulatory environment where that is the most efficient way to do it.
I'm Kit Matthew from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And I think another trend that we're not thinking about is as libraries are pushed to raise more of their own money and be more accountable, whether to government or private funders, and we're all about impact and proving our investment, there's a tension there, you know, because it's no longer just how many books did you check out? It's what are those people doing? How many people come back? What are they learning? So I'd be curious to know what's happening in the UK.
And if you don't get your numbers, you're under threat. Yeah. Does anybody want to respond to that? And then we'll come to you. No? Okay. Do you want to go? Yes?
Yeah.
Ernestine Bradley, I'm at the New School. When I first listened to your presentation, I thought, oh, that sounds like spying is made very easy nowadays. If everything is under surveillance, you know, what is there that still needs to be spied if the material is available? That's my first, I don't know whether it's a question or simply a comment. Maybe I'm totally wrong, please tell me. The second question is more a question of futurology, the future. Are there any areas left in our lives that are not yet surveyed? And I also feel that, you know, the whole field we are talking about is maybe 15 years old, 20. And I now register a remarkable change of behavior in mostly the young people, because I'm no longer young. What will the next generation be like that really grows up without even understanding how conditioned they have been by all this digitalization? So,
yeah, there's a good question. The metadata tends to be collected and data often is not. So data is collected targeted. So if someone wants to spy on your phone conversations, they're going to do that deliberately. We know the NSA for a program collected all conversations going in and out of Bermuda, for example. That's a small island, limited scope. They were able to do that. Doing that for a larger country is still beyond scope. But that being said, you know, the ephemeral conversation is dying. I mean, nowadays, when I chat with my wife, we tend to chat on text message, right? Because it's easier. And that is recorded in a way that a voice conversation is not. You know, also, you're losing the assuredness. Right? So 100 years ago, you and I could go out in the Central Park, look around, see nobody around us, and have a conversation that we knew absolutely wasn't listened on. That has been forever lost. And it's not just recordings, it's shotgun mics, it's hidden microphones, all sorts of technologies raise the potential. As to the generations, this has been studied a lot. Young people actually don't care less about privacy. They just care about it differently than you do. And in a lot of ways, internet is the biggest generation gap since rock and roll. And to a fundamental level, you don't understand how young people use the internet and never will, just like rock and roll didn't make sense to the old people. And the thing about generation gaps is that the younger generation always wins. The older generation dies. Fundamental, right? That's always happens. So the norms are being created by the younger generation. And the norms are more sharing, but they are still very private. And they go through enormous lengths to maintain their privacy. A little sloppily, a little naively, but they are trying. So do not think that privacy is disappearing with the generations.
Okay. I'm going to come to you, but Joel, could you think about something for me? I'll come back to you after this intervention.
Wow, you're getting prepped.
If that is going to be the norm going forward, what are some of the ethical benchmarks we should think about? As a question for you.
Amy Garmer with the Aspen Institute's Dialogue on Public Libraries. I have two questions. They're unrelated to one another, so I'll just toss them out. The first is regarding how technology is evolving and whether or not you can foresee that new generations of technology are going to change any of this dynamic. I'm involved in a group that's discussing potential uses of blockchain technology for libraries. And I don't know enough about it myself. I'm not a technologist. I know enough to be concerned, but is there, when you start to allow machine learning and AI to take over in making decisions and breaking up the people who own the information, does that change any of this conversation around data and how libraries should be thinking about data? And then the second is related to a survey that we did at the Aspen Institute with ICMA. When we started the project on libraries a couple of years ago, there's really great data on what the public thinks about libraries and wants from libraries. And Deborah, I think you cited Pew's research on the public, saying that they want libraries to offer programs to teach people about protecting their privacy and security online, and they want libraries to offer programs to teach people how to use digital tools. The two are closely related. When we did this survey with the International City County Management Association of local government managers, about the only area where we saw significant differences between the local government managers and the public saying what libraries definitely should do was around programs to teach people about privacy. There was a 35-point difference between what the public said libraries should do and local government, and also close to a 20-point difference between whether or not libraries should be teaching people how to use computers. So I'm curious whether, Ciara, if that's the case in the UK, and Deborah and Bruce, if you'd like to comment on why you think that might be such a big gap.
I can start on some of that. There's a lot of technology that protect privacy. Deborah talked about Tor and Let's Encrypt and HTTPS everywhere, and I could just go on. Deborah, you mentioned blockchain. All of these have potentials. The real problem is most of your privacy violations are not under your control. There's nothing you can do to prevent your cell phone company from knowing who you sleep with, because it's not your data, it's their data. Nothing you can do to prevent Facebook from knowing what you're saying, because they have it. So it's not the tech. We have lots of tech. It's laws that require companies who are now operating not in your interest to use that tech. And that's where we have the problems. I have privacy technologies. I have lots of them, but I need to get them used.
Merely have, I can speculate on the gap. Having talked to librarians dealing with their local government managers, I think some of it is austerity. I think some of it is seeing libraries as only repositories for books. The individual who probably could better answer my question is housed in Washington at the ALA offices there. The Information Privacy Project has worked more on this issue. But it doesn't surprise me, because that's where we often find our worst resistance to any issue dealing with privacy and intellectual freedom, is when we reach the county commissioner or the city council in a particular locality. They don't see the utility. They don't understand why these issues are important, or the mission of the library. And so it really doesn't surprise me that they don't see the utility of it. And some of this is PR, explaining, getting the message out that, all those folks that are jobless in your community, they need the library, they need that computer training in order to find jobs today. And some of that just hasn't sunk in yet with politicians, I think.
In the UK, the question hasn't been asked of the public, I don't think. But I have an instinctive feeling that there might be that difference. And the reason I say that is because in the place where I run the library service, we did a big public consultation in 2014 about potentially handing over libraries to volunteers. And one of the consistent messages back from the public, who had a very sophisticated understanding of what the library staff member did, and part of it was about protecting privacy, and they did not want volunteers because they wanted to know that their information, the way they used the library in a rural area, was safe, and they trusted the library staff to do that, and they didn't trust the volunteers. So on the basis of that observation that I saw for myself a lot, I wouldn't be surprised if that happened.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but
Okay, I just have two sort of, I guess, general sort of broad stroke observations. One was prompted by Ernestine Bradley's question about, you know, what's left in terms of privacy. I hope that there's still a zone of privacy between, let's say, me and my doctor, or me and my
Not in the U.S.
So that's gone.
That's gone, completely gone.
How
Electronic
about-
patient records. It's the insurance industry, and the UK.
Right,
It's
that's- so
the
that's
NHS.
insurance.
Forget it. You're a
All
host.
right, so let's go down the list. What about clergy? Is that still okay?
Do they take confession online?
I don't know.
All
Anyway,
right, so you're good there. All
we're
right.
good for let's hear it for the clergy. I think. What about? So we did have. I don't know if we have now attorneys in the room, but lawyers. Is there a zone of privacy there that's still sacrosanct?
It's legal, though. There's actually a big case right now in the U.S. about a prison violating that routinely when prisoners were talking to their attorneys.
But I meant but the point is there is a zone of privacy
Oh,
there.
a legal zone that is breached.
Yeah.
I think you get what you pay for there.
One other, I'll just toss one. This could be for informal conversation, but I do think it's important, even just in terms of employment. Ron, you were talking before about within the context of work. You know, you would like to think that there would be a zone of confidentiality, if not privacy. You know, that when one could give one's opinion to one's supervisor or boss in terms of a private. I mean, there's a reason there are doors on offices and so on. You know, sometimes. All right. Anyway, I was just trying to be responsive and trying to think of what were traditional zones of privacy that may be changing. And then this is to my last point, which is what's of interest to me is this idea of normative shift and how norms change over time. Sometimes it's generation, sometimes it's technology. But in light of libraries, I'd like to think that libraries remain a sanctuary in some way for freedom of thought and freedom of expression. We haven't talked a lot about what goes on in libraries, but it's a place where people come to learn, and it should be a zone of privacy in the sense of there should be complete freedom there to be able to have access to ideas and information and educational kinds of services. So anyway, when I thought about this program, I hope we can think of the special role that libraries play in a democratic society, and that they are, as I said at the beginning, norm setters in some way, and perhaps norm defenders in certain ways. And I think this conversation has helped us in that direction.
Anyone notice the one zone of privacy he missed, the big one, the important one, the one that's left? Totally censorship. You alluded to it. The space between your ears is still a zone of privacy. We do not have any technology that can penetrate that. They're working on it, but not yet.
I like the freedom of thought. Space is a freedom of thought.
Freedom of thought, that's the space.
And building norms as well. I think that seems to me a takeaway from that exchange. A strong role for libraries to play, but also for us to think about how do we make that work where it's not working, and how do we sustain some of that.
Everyone needs to practice the memory palaces.
Hi, thank you. Fascinating discussion. Maybe to take this a little bit away from libraries, but some of our clients, I work for a private consulting firm, and we, the Dylan Schneier Group, we work for global governments and for corporations. We're talking about, in our firm, our clients are both public and private, and many of them are very large data holders. So they hold a lot of data, both on the public and private side. And there's a talk about the future of philanthropy. And the reason I bring this up is because with the United Nations, there's a talk about issues that are globally important to everyone, the environment, hunger, things like that. And so how do you take this data that an Amazon or a Google has, and the social good that a lot of these nonprofits have, and bring that together to solve global problems. And so the future of philanthropy, and the UN right now is having that conversation. And it always, the arguments begin around the ethics and setting a protocol on how you take this data that is mined by Amazon or Google and couple it with a nonprofit, a library, or a heart association or whomever, and use that and pool that for global good.
A small question. Anybody want to respond to that?
I mean, that's really what I was talking about at the end of my talk with this is the fundamental problem of the information age. I mean, that's it right there. How do you do that?
Going to the development shift, one of my observations, I work in Africa a lot, and particularly in rural Africa a lot. And I was sharing this with colleagues the other day. One of the things I've reached is about how do we get more young people in rural areas access to the internet, because this is the future of doing business, of growth, of development. And then I hit the wall when it came to what does data protection look like in that environment. And I hit an impasse, which is, how do I introduce what we've learned from the abuse of data and privacy and take it into that context, which could have the possibility of doing a technology leap? And I'm stuck. So I think it's a very, very valid point you make, that this is some of the thinking we have to do. Where it's not gone yet, how do we use that to innovate how it can be used is a question in my mind, which very much talks to the point you're making.
So ALA can comment on this too, but in the US we have discounted broadband rates for public libraries, and one of the challenges is it's so complicated to sign up. People need help. And the second thing is...
It sounds like it's more than complicated.
Yeah, once you get, where there's been this big push to get access through hotspots and broadband with commercial providers into rural areas and tribal areas, but then it's ahead of the digital literacy piece, right? So it's almost moving so fast, and we're investing in digital literacy training and looking at the role of libraries and museum staff to do that.
In a lot of ways, privacy is a luxury if you're on the other side of the digital divide. I mean, if you don't have access to the internet, I mean, you need access. You have such power. It's only after you get access are the nuances important.
Okay. Any other? You've got a mic there.
Good afternoon, Brian Ashley, Arts Council England, Director of Libraries there. Good to see you all this afternoon. I suppose, reflecting on the recent exchanges just there, my question is the genie out of the bottle for good? And are we into damage limitation, risk mitigation? Or is there any sense in which that genie can go back in the bottle? And one of the conversations we were having earlier this week, and forgive us for perhaps a superficial knowledge around this, but reflecting back to antitrust legislation, not necessarily a direct relationship, but is there conceptually something that could put the genie back in the bottle?
I think a genie's not out of the bottle. I mean, so that economist, which is last week's, talked about changes in antitrust regulation. And this is the economist making the argument that antitrust is obsolete for the information age. So, here we have a conservative publication that is talking about that as a solution. None of this is irreversible. This is all policy, this is all norms, this is all laws. I mean, it's just like saying if someone invents the handgun, well, people are going to murder each other, genie's out of the bottle. Right? The tech is you can't take back the tech, but you can mitigate tech with law. If you say to Facebook, we're going to put you in jail if you do this, they're going to stop doing it. Right? And if they're told you must delete these data stores, this is illegal to collect, these are illegal uses, these are illegal inferences. In the US, it is illegal to make loan decisions based on race. It's illegal to do it explicitly, and it's illegal to use zip code as a proxy. Right? The data's there, you can do it, you're just not allowed to. And you can make these changes. We can build the society we want. We are not stuck with what the technology gives us, just like we're not stuck with murder, I guess except in the US.
Did you have your hand?
Jonathan Gage with the Carnegie Council. I'm a trustee here, and My day job is with the Boston Consulting Group as a writer. So my thought or my question is, these issues are very complex and they seem to be moving quickly. But to the question of how libraries could galvanize public opinion to protect digital rights, you've really explored the issues and articulated them well, but what I haven't heard, and I wonder if it might be useful, would be delineating exactly the policies that would be required to protect digital privacy. You've done a bit of that. I've just heard a bit of that just now. Crystallize those so that people could understand them. And then secondly, to very explicitly campaign to have that accomplished in ways that people can understand it through their own experience and what is threatened in their lives and in their own privacy. I mean, you know, against the surveillance and the business model of the internet doesn't really, it's not like no more war or women's rights, but to outline the specific policies and changes that would need to be made, and then to articulate in almost like campaign fashion, this needs to be done, that needs to be done to accomplish that.
In part, that was what we hoped to achieve with Choose Privacy Week. You know, that we used to have highfalutin language about sparking a national conversation on the importance of privacy and things. And it's a matter of resources right now. We don't have, it's possible to start a campaign like that, but we would also have to get buy-in from local libraries. And that's the fundamental of library politics in the United States. All politics are local. And so there are large library systems like Brooklyn and New York that would have the resources and the political space to engage in that kind of campaign. And I can think of libraries in rural Midwest that would never have the flexibility to engage in that. ALA certainly could take leadership, but to be blunt, we would have to marshal support from a larger swath of the membership for the investment that that kind of campaign would do, and get buy-in from our lobbyists in Washington and things like that. And that is not impossible, but it is it's a large endeavor that we just haven't had the resources in our office to attempt. I work in an office with 5 people, and my attention is scattered across privacy, censorship, First Amendment issues. And so I don't know, I just simply can't make that happen. But it's a possibility. And Bill, we may want to talk about that in the future, you know. And you can congratulate Bill. He's the incoming chair of the ALA's privacy subcommittee this year.
The queen and some sort of sword is involved in that. But just a little anecdote to kind of play that out. So at ALA last year, I gave a talk about New York Public and its new privacy policy. And this person comes up during the question and answer period, and she says, "I'm not going to tell you my name or even where I'm from." So I knew it was something. She said, "I run a little tiny library in a small town, and every week the police come and they want to know what people have been borrowing." And I said, "Well, can you at least tell me what state you're from?" And she said, "California." And I said, "You are in luck. You've got one of the strongest library statutes in the country, as Lisa knows." She said, "That doesn't matter. They still come and they still ask for the information." I said, "Well, what attorney or what law enforcement represents you?" And she said, "It's the local city attorney." She said, "The problem is they also represent the police department." Yes. This is the quandary. So whatever regulations, whatever laws, whatever guidelines we set up for people, there is the fact of daily life, and especially how it plays out into smaller communities.
Well, and you know, she should actually have called us because.
Okay, I want to kind of try and bring us to a close now. Thank you so much for your time and your inputs. Ciara, do you have any? Did you want to add any more? Okay, I'll ask Bruce to kind of say some last few words before we finish. But I just want to say, for me, thank you very much. It's been much appreciated. But I drew from the conversation the legal and regulatory framework seems important. From our study group, I think Neil was talking to us about how we need to get the citizens themselves coming up, the library users, the patrons as is described here, coming through with their own interventions and approaches to this, and we need to engage them a lot more than we are on these issues. I think also a pull away for me is also the amount of programs we can do. And I've been my big learning on this trip so far, and I hope there's more to come, is also this idea about the library being a key educator. I used to think libraries were a place to go and get knowledge, but actually education is so much more than that, just to get some knowledge, but also to actually understand how things work and how to deal with them is something else as well. So I think there's some learning for us to take with us and some things for us to think about that we've heard about. But Bruce, I don't know if you want to give us the closing words.
I've been pretty bleak about data not being under our control, but solving this is a matter of changing public opinion. And what libraries, in my world, what libraries do is they change norms. Something as simple as libraries using Tor. Because the rhetoric from the FBI, from the UK equivalent, is that only criminals use Tor. You use Tor to buy drugs. That's what Tor is for. And having libraries install Tor is an enormous, powerful statement that Tor is for privacy protection for everybody. And it's those sorts of things that change the dialogue. Right? When libraries put in warrant canaries, when they refuse to give the police data on what their patrons are reading, they're making a powerful statement. Right? And librarians sort of have a special place in our mythos. Right? They're kind of unimpeachable. Right? They are sort of the epitome of regular. And to have libraries do these things is powerfully important, and I really applaud that. I want to close by saying there was a copy of my book found, and to your point, starting this question, right? This is the title's Data and Goliath. If you pronounce it Data and Goliath, you don't get the joke. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you very, very much, and do please give a big hand for all our speakers and for yourselves. Thank you.